U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy for Ukraine Keith Kellogg arrived in Kiev on Monday. According to Associated Press, Kellogg was greeted by the head of Ukraine's presidential office, Andrii Yermak, as he arrived at a train station in the capital before the pair left for talks. According to Yermak, the topics for discussion during Kellogg's visit will be defense, strengthening security, weapons, sanctions, protection of our people, and enhancing cooperation between Ukraine and the United States.
In the Toretsk direction, Ukrainian soldiers destroyed a monster tank, which the Russian invaders tried very hard to protect from drone attacks. The 28th Separate Mechanized Brigade, named after the Knights of the Winter Campaign, told about the unsuccessful assault for the occupiers in which they used infantry and 2 monster tanks. Artillerymen and UAV pilots stopped them, inflicting new losses on the Russian army. 1 tank was disabled and a second was destroyed. After several hits, the tanks tried to disperse along the forest belts to safely land the infantry among the greenery, but the Knights hit hard with FPV, bombers and even drones with artificial intelligence. The 28th Motorized Rifle Brigade noted, "As a result of the battle, 1 tank was set on fire and disabled, and the other was completely destroyed." The Ukrainian military said that it took about 60 FPV drones to destroy the monster tank because it was difficult to find a vulnerable. It was very difficult to find a weak spot. Why is it important to destroy it? Because in addition to infantry, such sheds may contain electronic warfare, which will allow other equipment to get there. Also, the presence of mine trolls, which clear the way for future assaults, in particular for motorcycles, etc. Monster tanks is an ironic name that Ukrainian military and analysts have started to use for some modifications of Russian tanks, especially the T-62 and T-55, which are equipped with primitive protection in the form of a large metal structure on top of the turret. Visually, it does resemble a barn roof, hence the name. Typically, these tanks have a metal frame or net over the turret, similar to a roof or canopy. They are also sometimes additionally lined with sandbags, barrels or slabs. In this way, the occupiers are trying to defend themselves from FPV drones and anti-tank missile systems, as well as cluster munitions and artillery shells. Analysts noted that it is important to destroy such equipment because, in addition to infantry, it can house electronic warfare, which will cover the occupiers from Ukrainian drones. Such sheds can also carry trolls to clear the way from mines for further assault operations. In the first week of July, approval and trust ratings for Russian dictator Vladimir Putin dropped significantly by 4 percentage points each. This is evidenced by the latest data from the Public Opinion Foundation. For the first time since the fall of 2022, when the country was undergoing mobilization, the Kremlin's leaders' support figures began to plummet. According to the study, between June the 29th and July the 6th, the level of approval of the permanent head of the Russian Federation fell from 83% to 79%, and the level of trust fell from 82% to 78%. Analysts believe that this was not caused by one event, but by a number of factors that caused a feeling of instability and anxiety among citizens. According to Vladislav Inozemtsev, a doctor of economic sciences and an expert at the European Centre for Analysis and Strategies, the key trigger was not the war, but the rise in utility tariffs. It was during these days that Russians began to receive July bills with new, significantly increased amounts. The increase in tariffs turned out to be much greater than the rate of inflation. People understand that the authorities are squeezing the last bit out of them without any qualms of conscience. Inozemtsev emphasized in a comment to the Moscow Times, since July the 1st, utility bills across the country have increased by an average of 13.4%, the sharpest increase in the last 10 years. However, in a number of regions, the jump was even more painful. In Moscow by 15%, in the Moscow region by 18.3%, in Kuzbas by almost 20%. The absolute record was recorded in Izhevsk, where the increase was 38%. Economic pressure was compounded by other sources of discomfort. Residents of the country faced widespread internet outages as well as chaos in air travel caused by logistical disruptions and service interruptions. Political scientist Abbas Galyamov points out that the increase in tariffs is perceived by society as yet another confirmation of the authorities' inability to cope with the consequences of the war. In his opinion, the recent tensions in relations with Donald Trump have been an additional blow to Russians' expectations. The Russians felt deceived. They had hoped that both the SVO and the period of international tension in general were moving towards their end, but then suddenly they realized that there was no end in sight. Galyamov noted, thus, the combination of economic pressure and growing political pessimism is beginning to have a noticeable impact on public sentiment, forcing Russians to re-evaluate their trust in the government. The Ukrainian Defense Forces attacked the base of the 810th Marine Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces in the Kursk region. The occupiers suffered heavy losses. This was reported by the Russian Z Resource Northern Channel associated with the Russian Army. The incident occurred in the village of Spalno, located approximately 5 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. As a result of the strike, according to his data, 7 Russian soldiers became Cargo 200. That is, they died. Another 10 were injured. Yesterday we wrote about the lottery. Yesterday, 810th was lucky. Today the drum has finished spinning. Sleeping. Among the dead are conscripts, wrote Z Channel. He is sure that there is a mole in the ranks of the Russian armed forces who is leaking the coordinates of military targets to the Ukrainian armed forces. It feels like the only one who works consistently and without failures in our direction is the informant who carefully and promptly leaks to the Ukrainians where our people are sitting, noted Severny Kanal. The unit in question is the 810th Separate Guards Marine Brigade of the Black Sea Fleet, considered one of the best trained in the Russian army. Ukraine makes extensive use of reconnaissance and precision targeting capabilities, both through technology and likely through local sources of information. Recently, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, reported the restoration of Ukrainian troops' positions and the holding of territories in the Kursk and Belgorod regions of Russia. This marked an important step in the context of the current frontline situation. At the meeting of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief's headquarters, attention was focused on the most active directions, namely Pokrovsk, Lyman, Novopavlivka and northern Slobozhanshchina. Over the past day, there were 188 combat engagements, resulting in Russian troop losses exceeding 1,000 personnel. Syrsky emphasized that Ukrainian forces are actively defending their positions, particularly in the Pokrovsk and Novopavlivka directions, preventing the Russian army from advancing deeper into the territory, as well as trying to stop the enemy from reaching the administrative borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region. The Commander-in-Chief highlighted the importance of holding positions in the border, Kursk and Belgorod regions, noting that Ukrainian forces continue to control the situation, not giving Russian troops any respite. The meeting also discussed the development of drone technologies for protecting rear cities, as well as measures to deter assaults and deep strikes on Russian territory. New interceptor drone crews are being formed, fighter pilot training continues, and the demand for high-tech drones remains high.